Welcome back for part 2 of my look back at the early years of Sinclair User. If you haven't already seen part 1, just click that little thingy in the corner and you'll find it, as well as my other classic mag reviews for the likes of Crash, Zap, YS and Amtix. This episode looks at issues 7 to 12 of Sinclair User and covers the period between October 82 and March 83. And if you're wondering what was going on in the world around that time, I can tell you that during those 6 months, war hero and air ace Douglas Bader died at the age of 72, unemployment hit a massive 14%, the British version of the Opel Corsa is announced and will launch soon under the name of the Vauxhall Nova, Henry VIII's flagship the Mary Rose is raised from the Solent, the Ford Sierra is launched as a replacement for the Cortina, 30,000 women hold hands around the 9-mile perimeter fence of the Greenham Common Air Base to protest against the housing of NATO nuclear missiles on English soil. Gandhi is released in cinemas and will go on to win 8 Oscars. Channel 4 begins broadcasting, with Countdown, hosted by Richard Whiteley, its first programme, and the first compact discs go on sale in the UK. But what was happening on Planet Sinclair? Let's grab Sinclair User issue 7 and find out. As the big purple sash on the cover proclaims, issue 7 is the biggest ever and has a whopping 84 pages, and inside we're told we'll find information on how to choose a cassette player, news on Sinclair's delivery problems, Clive Sinclair's views on the future, and a new home computer launch. So let's head inside. Sinclair Voyance is usually SU's look into the future, where the writers eulogise on their dreams for the technological landscape. But in issue 7, it deals with the here and now, the issues with Sinclair Research's backlog of orders for its flagship product, the ZX Spectrum. They do speculate about whether Sinclair could have held off launching the Spectrum until they were sure they had the capability, but hindsight's a wonderful thing, and it can't help the thousands who have been waiting up to 3 months for their machine. Clive Sinclair is said to be so concerned about the issue that he's written to the magazine to explain and to offer a £10 voucher and a promise that the backlog should be cleared by the end of the month. Clive's letter is published in the Spectrum User supplement that we'll be looking at shortly. The real look into the future comes from the Futurology article, where we hear Uncle Clive's views on the Western civilised world and why computers will bring forth a new golden age for civilization. As well as running Sinclair Research, Clive Sinclair's also chairman of British Mensa, the exclusive club for members with genius-level IQs, and in a speech at the Mensa Golden Age Symposium in Cambridge, Sinclair outlined his ideas for the future, not of his company or product lines, but the future of Western civilization. We're on the threshold of a new golden age, but that golden age must be triggered by an event that would startle society, something similar to the invention of writing or the moving type, both of which reduce the cost of information transfer by a factor of 100. And if this trigger occurs at the right time, then the body of men arises which can turn its attention to matters other than necessity. He also remarks that the golden ages are often marked by a great individual, a type of philosopher prince, like Pericles, Augustus, Lorenzo de' Medici, Elizabeth I, or Louis XIV. Is the computer that next individual? What could the next trigger be? Well, it just so happens that another 100-fold reduction in the cost of data transfer is just around the corner, a 12-inch optical disc that can work with televisions and show the equivalent of 10,000 books. Sinclair went on to say that we're leaving the industrial age, where society is encouraged to bring people together in great numbers, many thousands in a factory, many millions in a city, but he believes that our move away from this will restore the potential of the individual. He also gave predictions that large unemployment figures are not a passing trend, and that some 7 million more manufacturing jobs are likely to go before the end of the century, as processes are automated. The type of work we do now will need to change, but as people have more time to learn, so understanding of many areas of science will improve. And because we'll no longer need to devote the bulk of our time to production of objects, he can see the plateau of a new golden age. Early in the next century, we will have made intelligent machines, ending for all time the drudgery. With them, we can start the exploration of the universe. To some, Sinclair's ideas may seem like science fiction, but some cynics were only saying last year that the Spectrum wasn't possible. Moving on to something a little less highbrow, and we have the type-ins, and my pick is this version of Battleships by Michael Owen of Southport for the 16K ZX81. Battleships is certainly an enduring game type, as even 5 years later, Elite would release a new version for the Spectrum. And apart from a 2-page advert for the shiny new Spectrum, there wasn't much to shout about in this bumper issue. So let's go back to that supplement. Spectrum User Issue 2 expands into 24 pages, from 16 in the previous issue, but once again 50% of those pages are adverts. In the news, we hear that Spectrum will be getting a huge increase in facilities available on Prestel, as a new database of 25 to 30,000 pages is being set aside for the system. Users will need an adapter and a subscription to Micronet, however. We also get a little more information on how Sinclair are handling those backlogs. We're told that production is currently running at 5,000 units a week and increasing quickly, and it's expected that Sinclair will ensure that they're well on top of mail order sales before they even consider making the system available to retail stores. And a nifty device from Stephen Adams has just hit the market that allows a 16K RAM pack from a ZX81 to be used on a 16K Spectrum. He says the device is available for just £7 and was created because his work required more than the 16K his Spectrum allowed him, and it felt like such a waste to have all that ZX81 gear just lying around. The letters page is generally the usual sycophantic or passive-aggressive type of feedback, but we do get Clive Sinclair's letter in full, where he offers his apology and a £10 voucher to all those still waiting for their delivery. He says that demand has far exceeded expectation and left the company swamped with orders. As well as the voucher, Sinclair also confirmed that customers would also get a new demonstration tape containing a keyboard trainer, a game called Through the Wall, and 2 utilities. He then assured the public that all of their production issues had been overcome and that the backlog would be clear by the end of September, and that he hopes that customers can see the delays in the context of over 500,000 successful computer deliveries in the last 2 years. In the software section, we find that the software tape that Sinclair alluded to will be called Horizons, and it will be packed in with all Spectrums shipped from now on. We also hear about a new golf game from R&R Software featuring high-res graphics, and an upgraded version of Quicksilver's ZX81 title Meteor Storm, plus a new game called Winged Avenger that's based on the arcade hit Phoenix. Andrew Pennell then looks at the Spectrum architecture in an article about the use of machine code on the Spectrum. There are 3 programs in the listings section for you to try out, and first up we have Shooter Alien Defense. Okay, so we have to defend Earth by shooting the aliens. Okay, we'll choose beginner difficulty. We must not let 20 aliens pass. Okay, it's building a starfield. Slowly. And off we go. Okay, so everything stops when you fire. There we go, 5 points. Oh, missed him. That's another pass. Doesn't tell you how many that have passed you, so I don't know how close I am to losing. I like the way the alien changes colour every time it makes a move though, that's a decent effect. I think that first 5 points was just a fluke. Oh, here we go. We're on a roll now. It's obviously a very basic listing, but I think there's a little bit of fun in there. I think if I'd have typed it out rather than just downloading the completed file, I think I'd have been quite happy with it. Score table as well. And I do like that. It tells you how many aliens you've shot down. The next program is a character generator to speed up user-defined graphics creation. And then we get another game, Missile. Okay, so this one's written by 13-year-old B. Smith. We're in a boat at the bottom of the screen, and we have to shoot the plane at the top, and we can direct our missile. So it's a guided missile simulator. Okay. Oh, I thought I'd hit it then. Right, so there must be a specific point on the plane you've got to hit. So let's keep trying. It's very responsive, the swerving of your missile. Oh, there we go. Right on the nose. Let's have another go. It's another very simple game, but another fairly enjoyable one that I wouldn't have felt too bad about typing in. Got him again. Andrew Houston then returns to answer your programming questions, most of which relate to the technical differences between the ZX81 and the Spectrum. And in the final article, Christopher Lee takes the chess program from the Spectrum's manual and attempts to improve it with bigger and better graphics. Issue 8 has a business focus, as illustrated by the frustrated sales manager drowning in calls and paperwork. But all he needs to do, according to the front cover, is let Sinclair take the business strain. We start as usual with Sinclair Voyance, and this time we're dealing with the growing trend of companies announcing products early in the design or development process that are then delayed multiple times, or in some cases never appear. The microdrive being a great example. But they also say that the list could be extended to include the Binatone £50 computer or the Acorn Electron. And while Sinclair User say it's unnecessary to again bring up the many complaints regarding delays to the Spectrum, it is necessary to forget the problems only when the lessons have been learned. Until then, users should be equal parts sceptical and patient. After a couple of slow months, the price reduction to under £50 has seen ZX81 sales spike again, with a 5-fold increase in sales between July and August. And a new micro has just hit the streets, with a 16K Auric retailing for £99 and a 48K version for £169, undercutting the Spectrum by £10, whilst also beating the Spectrum's specifications. And Atari have continued their war against copycat games. The American company has written to Swindon-based DJL Software, requesting a copy of its Zuckman game to see if it breaches their Pac-Man copyright. This follows Bug-Byte pulling their VIC-20 Pac-Man clone Vic-Man after receiving litigation threats from Atari. And whilst Bug-Byte did not feel that their game breached Atari's copyright, they simply didn't have the resources to fight a company the size of Atari. Futurology then takes a look at the future of leisure. We hear that 2,000 years ago, Aristotle made the comment that we work to have leisure. But as most of the toiling in those days was done by human slaves, it feels a little off from Aristotle's perspective, but probably right for us. But if that leisure time is so precious, what role could computers play? It's possible to identify 3 functions that form something of a leisure hierarchy: rest and recuperation from work, entertainment and the relief of boredom, and personal and social development. If computers are to take the strain in our work life and free up more leisure time, the rest and recuperation becomes less important. Of course, computers are far better suited to the other 2 functions of leisure and personal development, so this is somewhat self-fulfilling. The unending supply of games will certainly help tick the entertainment box, and the programmable nature of a computer, its distinct language and untapped possibilities feed heavily into the self-development. But you can also use a computer for home learning. No need to go to evening classes to learn conversational French, when you can pick up a foreign language learning companion for your micro. Despite estimates that by the end of the 80s, 1/5 of all households will have a computer for personal use, the majority of people are still likely to be slow to recognise what the microcomputer can offer them. Aristotle himself would probably have enjoyed the challenge of microcomputing, but even he might have needed some encouragement to take the first steps in this new leisure direction. Software Scene kicks off with a great pun to tell us about some new war games when it says, "May the forces be with you." The games in question are Night Gunner from Digital Integration and Naval Blockade from Houston Consultants. Another military game reviewed is Digital Integration's Fighter Pilot, but the ZX81's lack of high-res graphics means that the game is a little dull, even if the simulation is interesting. And we see that DJL are at it again, this time with a Frogger clone. After their Pac-Man clone got Atari's knickers in a twist, might this one go the same way with Konami? I always like to have a glance at the adverts when looking through classic magazines to marvel at some of the wacky designs being marketed. And this ZX81 or Spectrum briefcase caught my eye, especially after the story of the typical Sinclair User family that was in issue 6. 2 typings stood out for me this issue, both 16K ZX81 interpretations of hugely popular games. The first is a Pong clone called Tennis for Two, which was of course the name of the first recognised video game in 1958 by William Higginbotham that ran on a medical oscilloscope. Then there's Pac-Man, but in this version there are no ghosts and it's more of a race against time than a race against a ghoulish creature. And finally for the main magazine, we get a feature on 16-year-old Scottish schoolboy David Stevenson, who won a Sinclair ZX printer in the July issue's competition to write a programme requiring 48k of RAM. David was talking to one of the schoolmasters who said he wanted a programme to sort examination results, so he set about writing it. Using machine code and BASIC, the programme allows more than 1,000 names and information to be entered, working out average marks, sorting and displaying the lists in order of merit and alphabetical order. The third and final Spectrum User supplement is the shortest yet, at just 12 pages, with only 5 of those being actual content. And in the news, we hear of a collaboration between Sinclair Research and Possum Controls to produce specialist versions of the Spectrum for use by people with disabilities. 3 versions are available, including one where the operator stops a scanning light when it reaches the desired function. Delays are now shorter for deliveries on new Spectrums, but the target of the end of September for the clearance of the backlog was missed. However, Sinclair hope to be back to the 28 days standard at some point in October. And we also hear of the impossible being made possible. Despite Sinclair saying that it wasn't possible to load ZX81 programs into a Spectrum, East London Robotics have released a converter device that does just that. The letters page is once again dominated by Spectrum delays, with customers angry at the delays, having to pay postage and packing to use the £10 voucher, and also the reliability of the machine once it's actually received. Stephen Adams then shows us how to create a PCB part that will allow you to use some ZX81 peripherals with your Spectrum. And finally, we get information on 3 new Spectrum games. As well as a new save and load function, Arctic's Spectrum Chess has an impressive analyze function, where the computer will analyse a situation you may have found difficult or for endgame analysis. Escape is a maze game from New Generation Software, where you must run around a 3-dimensional maze avoiding hungry dinosaurs. You need to find the axe and then make your way to the exit to complete the level. You do run slower when holding the axe though, so keep an eye out. In Great Britain Limited, you're the incoming PM, and you inherit the problems of the 1980s Great British economy. After choosing your party allegiance, you must raise and lower taxes and allocate money to various benefits and infrastructure improvement projects to influence the key metrics of unemployment and inflation. Can you last a full 5-year term and then win re-election? From my experience, probably not, as Great Britain Limited is frustratingly difficult and if nothing else, makes you understand what a thankless job Chancellor of the Exchequer really is. Issue 9 brings us the bumper Christmas edition, and under a snow-covered logo and a wintry window scene, we see 2 young children delighted to have received a ZX81 from Santa. And inside, Sinclair Voyance talks of the expected surge in demand for Sinclair products over the peak Christmas period, and how big a gamble Sinclair are making by increasing advertising and special offers when they're only just getting out of their supply issue debacle. It's more acceptable for delays in the summer months, as we can be occupied by the warm weather, but Christmas Day is a hard deadline, and the company won't be forgiven for empty stockings on the big day. We also hear that from next month, Spectrum User will be incorporated into the main magazine rather than a separate supplement. In the news, there are calls for the government to introduce import restrictions to head off the invasion of cheaper Japanese machines that has negatively impacted other industries such as hi-fi equipment. The demand comes from the British Microcomputer Manufacturers Group, a collective of 21 of Britain's leading computer companies, including Sinclair Research. And to underline the issue, we hear that Sanyo will soon be entering the UK micro market with their PH10, 20 and 25 machines that will be marketed in the UK by Logitech. We also hear that Sinclair machines are becoming big business outside of the UK. This claim is based on Sinclair User's overseas sales, which now reach 4,000 copies per month, mostly to Benelux and Scandinavia, but as far afield as the Far East and Saudi Arabia. We also hear that the planned direct competitor for the Spectrum, the Auric, has had its release date pushed back 2 months, but is still hoping to launch before Christmas. And we hear that the current craze of competition tapes is growing in popularity, with companies like Arctic and Automata offering huge cash prizes for the first person to complete their programs. The head of Sinclair's computer division, Nigel Searle, then gives us his view on what computers will look like in the year 2000, and some of his predictions are spookily accurate. The personal computer of the future will be small and inexpensive, says Searle. It will certainly fit in your pocket, maybe even the size of a credit card, and it'll have no keyboard. Instead, you'll communicate with the computer by speaking to it, and it will talk to you like a friend, and will employ a flat, colour, high-resolution display. It'll have massive memory containing just about everything you want to know about the rest of the world, as well as any amount of personal data that you want it to remember. It'll have human-like intelligence, but will easily surpass the human brain for speed. It will obviously lack a body, consciousness, and emotion, but those latter two may eventually be simulated. The portable computer will also serve as a portable telephone, enabling you to communicate with any other computer owner anywhere in the world. Searle left Sinclair in 1986 when Amstrad took over, and it's not clear what he went on to do. But it'd be interesting to hear from him now about how accurately he described the smartphone all the way back in 1982. Futurology courts controversy as we find Chris Reynolds sceptical about how owning a computer will help future careers, arguing that once acne-embarrassed schoolboys with home computers are 10 a penny, the simple ability to program will have no value in the job market. In fact, he also suggests that there is evidence that ownership of a private micro can have a negative effect on studies and job prospects. One reason is that the computer languages that need to be understood are often unique and do not encourage a wide breadth of knowledge. His second issue appears to be that computers are too much fun. Most junior jobs do not require computers, so encouraging students down that path is not appropriate. He then touches on code junkies and computer addiction, claiming that those students who become obsessed with computers generally fail their courses and become unemployable due to their reluctance to work rather than play with the machines. And if you think the writer's just a Luddite with an axe to grind against modern technology, Dr. Chris Reynolds is currently Reader of Computer Science at Brunel University, organising computer science teaching for the first-year mathematics students. John Gilbert then takes a look at the first batch of Sinclair-branded software, but concludes that the quality of the titles does not match that of the machine. There are 5 game tapes, each containing 4 games, but the games are very simple, samey, and easy to quickly lose interest in. Priced at £4.95, Gilbert feels Sinclair should have sacrificed quantity for quality. The Fun to Learn series are similarly dismissed, with the exception of geography, though his description of the programme sounds suspiciously like the type-in towns from Sinclair User issue 6. ICL's Biorhythms is commended, apart from its confusing visuals, but it's the Scion-produced tapes that are given the greatest praise. These are ViewCalc, Space Raiders, Hungry Horace and Planetoids. In the type-ins this month, I've chosen Cricket, a game created by Peter Horlock from Godalming in Surrey, and was submitted as an entry into the programming competition in Sinclair User's Summer Special Edition. The game takes more of a management approach rather than arcade action, as you play out a 2-innings match between Middlesex and Surrey. Issue 10 then marks the move into 1983 with a rather strange magician ventriloquist as it offers us magic ways of using your ZX81. Sinclair Voyance looks at the expected developments for 1983, listing the microdrive, RS-232 networking interfaces and the Prestel adapter as the main things to look out for. They also list a number of competitors to watch, as new machines are expected from Sharp, Sanyo and Epson, though they believe that the main competition for Sinclair will come from Dragon, Acorn and Commodore's VIC-20. But in what it calls the high spot of the year for those interested in Clive Sinclair and his company, we expect another new computer to be launched in 1983, as Sinclair makes his move into the business machines market. In the news, we hear that the Sinclair microdrive won't be a disc after all, and will actually be a floppy tape. But there's still no firm date for its release. Sinclair User production editor, Harold Mays, receives an OBE at Buck House for his services to journalism, and a workers' strike at the Timex factory in Dundee, where ZX Spectrums are manufactured, is not expected to impact deliveries. The strike was called when 5 workers were suspended and 1 dismissed without due process. New software this month includes Microgen's Scramble, which is called an above-average version of the popular arcade game. Pie-Mania is a fascinating adventure game with a prize for the first person to complete it. Shaken Not Stirred is a copyright-infringing 2-part James Bond arcade adventure that was later re-released as Super Spy, with all the offending James Bond material removed. Quicksilver's Timegate is a time-travelling 3D shooter that they said had amazing graphics but high difficulty. And Remsoft have released their adventure game Love for the ZX81, and the game is specifically aimed at women as it follows an amorous lady in search of fun. We then get 3 pages of magic trick type-ins for your ZX81 to amaze your friends and family with tricks like Find the Lady and Mind Reader. But none of the 4 tricks will amaze or astound, so I really wouldn't bother typing them in. Pick of the type-ins are Hot Pursuit for the ZX81, where you have to chase a moving square until you can capture it, and Brick Bucket, which, as the name suggests, has you catching bricks in a bucket. It's nothing special, but it did give me minor Kaboom vibes. Issue 11 has gone very sci-fi green, as we see a man in a snazzy Space Invaders jumper being attacked by spaceships, to illustrate the lead feature on the new craze of home arcades. Sinclair Voyance ponders on what impact a 1-year ban on the import of home micros would have for the UK computer industry. The article's once again fearful of the Japanese muscling in on the UK market and is critical of the government, who it says appear to be doing all they can to discourage our industry from growing, and of the BBC for all its ill-informed reporting of new machines. In the news, Spectrums have finally gone on sale in 65 major branches of WH Smith's. Sinclair Research has finally moved into its new headquarters. The converted factory has been under development since it was purchased in autumn of 1981, and it's the first time that all departments of Sinclair Research will be under one roof. Software Scene tells us of the new 48K Spectrum version of Football Manager, with its new graphical match highlights. And there's also a new collection of 1K machine code games for the ZX81 by Micromega. Sinclair have updated the ZX81 flight simulator for the Spectrum, and the new trend of computer-moderated board games continues with the 16K ZX81 title Galaxy Conflict from Martech. We then get the first full-page advert for my weapon of choice back in the 8-bit days, the Competition Pro joystick. In the cover feature, John Gilbert investigates the new wave of more complex arcade games hitting the Spectrum. Most of the games covered are shooters in the Space Invaders, Asteroids or Defender style. Spectral Invaders from Bug-Byte is a game that most resembles its arcade inspiration. Space Intruders from Quicksilver is faster and great for high score chasers. Namtir Raiders from Arctic is addictive with graphics that are neither awkward in design or jerky. And Timegate from Quicksilver is called by far the best arcade game released for the Spectrum so far. We then get Asteroids games, Meteor Storm from Quicksilver and Planetoids from Sinclair. Arctic's ZX81 Galaxians is a little slow but addictive, and their version of Defender is similarly criticised. But Microgen's Scramble is called the best and fastest version of its arcade namesake, but Silversoft's attempt, Ground Attack, is dismissed for its long wait times. My typing choice this time is Beethoven, a remarkable program that allows you to produce music from your ZX81. Stefan Kranik of Paris has linked hex values to the tones available from the TV speakers and has produced a table to correlate those values with musical notes. The final issue for this video rounds out the first year of Sinclair User, and it gives us a nice picture of Gandalf to tell us that the Hobbit is the lead feature. and that we have more program pages than ever. But that comes at a cost, as the cover price has increased by a whopping 25%, from 60p to 75p. A different price change is discussed in Sinclair Voyance. With the launch of the US Spectrum, the Timex Sinclair 2000 only months away at a price of $200 for 48K and $150 for 16, this is significantly lower than the UK prices at around £125 and £95 respectively, so there's reasonable speculation that we will also see reductions closer to that level. Any price drop shouldn't worry the new group of investors who've purchased a 10% share of Sinclair Research. Only 3 years ago the company was recording profits of just £34,000 from sales of £257,000. Those profits have since soared to £14 million last year. However, we are warned that although Sinclair Research is much more than a one-person company, should Clive's interest in computers wane or his attention be drawn to other areas such as his electronic car division, this could change, and all it would take for Sinclair Research to be back where it started would be 2 high-cost failures. Following that 10% share sale, Clive Sinclair's net worth has exceeded £120 million, due to his 85% ownership of the company that's now valued at £136 million. And the threat of further strikes at Timex appears to be receding, as the company looks to shed half its workforce due to a drop in demand for watches, with Sinclair looking at contingency plans to move production to other sites should the issues impact the Spectrum's manufacturing. Software Scene tells us of the Spectrum's first word processor, TaskWord, a limited machine code monitor and a disassembler for the 16K Spectrum, and some games in the form of Transylvania Tower from Richard Shepherd Software, Subtract by Amoeba Software, Labyrinth and Super Bowl from Axis, and Spectres from Bugbyte. Spectres is a Pac-Man clone, but with some key differences, not least that the power pills hinder as much as they help. As an electrician, you must fit light bulbs throughout the Haunted Mansion maze. On each of the 4 levels, you'll find 4 generators. Collecting the generators will light up any previously laid bulbs, which will turn any ghosts that touch the light vulnerable and allow you to banish them. However, when the power runs out, all of the bulbs are then removed, meaning you'll have to traipse that whole route again and relay them 4 times, as only when you filled the whole room with bulbs can you move on to the next level. Labyrinth is a simple maze game where you look to get from the start to the exit as quickly as possible. You get to set the size of the maze and then see an overhead map for a short period. Play then switches to 3D, where you must try to remember the correct route. But watch you don't walk into any walls. You can glance at the map again if you get lost, but this will cost you points. At the end of the game, you do get a helpful overhead replay of your route, so you can see where you made any mistakes. And despite its simplicity, I quite enjoyed Labyrinth. Next, we get a follow-up article to issue 11's piece on the dangers of microcomputing. This time, J.R. Bird gives the other side of the story as he slams Chris Reynolds' piece as professional arrogance, and he asserts that computing is much more than programming. It's concerned with the flexible use and application of ideas that are structured logically by means of a language. A systematic takedown of the previous article, it's hard not to feel the burn that Reynolds must have felt when reading the rebuttal. Bird tells us that interaction between micro-owners and professionals, both at the formal teaching and informal social levels, could only benefit both. Experience from both sides could then stimulate more courses and lead to a new leisure time education industry. John Gilbert then returns with another look at Sinclair branded software, but this time he's far more impressed. He tells us that The Hobbit is the clear winner in the quality and value stakes, but that View 3D is another good Scion offering that allows users to create 3D objects that can then be rotated and viewed from any angle. 4 new adventures are released: Planet of Death, Inca Curse, Ship of Doom and Espionage Island, all from Arctic Computing. 1K Chess is an interesting addition, using some technical wizardry to squeeze the game into the unexpanded ZX81, though some features, such as castling and pawn promotion, have had to be removed. Superglooper is a Pac-Man clone that comes on the same tape as Frogger variant Frogs, and another twin pack includes versions of both Breakout and Scramble. A 1K compilation of games includes Fruit Machine Sim Jackpot, a simple maze game, and a computer Etch-a-Sketch. And beyond games, we also get ZX81 Toolkit, a series of machine code routines to help make programming easier, and 2 database programs, Collector's Pack and Club Records Controller. Stunt Rider is our typing's choice. You do need to make sure you type Run 9000 in before running the game properly to get the user-defined graphics, and although it says you can choose how many buses you jump over, but no matter what number I enter, it always starts me off with 8. The aim is to correctly judge your speed to jump over the buses, but with no visual indicator of the speed you're going, just an ever so slight change of pitch in the engine noise, the game can be quite infuriating. But I still found myself having multiple goes to try and get into double figures. And finally, despite being the cover star, Melbourne House's The Hobbit is covered in the final article, where we find that the Mind Games section has a new writer, in Quentin Heath. With a plot that follows closely to that of Tolkien's book, but with added dangers to make it more interesting. A key takeaway from the game is that many players waste too much time examining objects that will not be used until later. For example, the chest at the start of the game is not full of treasure or armour. Why would it be when the game's only just begun? That will become useful later when you have something to put in it. And whilst many are apparently struggling with Tolkien's English that all the characters speak, we're told not to give up and to experiment by talking to Gandalf, Elrond and Thorin. It does give a few more specific tips in the box out, but these should only be read if you're desperate. And with that, year 1 of Sinclair User is complete. We've seen ZX81 sales fall and rise again, the Spectrum launch and suffer endless delivery issues, Clive Sinclair moving his company into plush new offices and also becoming very rich indeed. Sinclair User has seen its page count rise by about 30%, with much of it now in colour, but that's also brought a price rise. All in all, it's been an interesting year for both Sinclair Research and Sinclair User, and I'll be back with the final 2 parts of this series soon. So until then, thanks for watching and see you soon on Sir Clive's Retro Games World.